Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Learning Podcast. I'm Brain, and I'm super excited to be here with you today.
And I'm Anna. We're so glad you've joined us. Whether you're out for a walk, sitting at home, or maybe even commuting, thank you for tuning in.
Today's episode is going to be so much fun. We're talking about get ready for this funny English mistakes that changed the whole meaning.
Oh, yes. Brain, English learners often tell me they're afraid of making mistakes. But what they don't realize is sometimes those mistakes are hilarious and they can make for the best learning moments.
Exactly. And we've all been there. I remember learning another language and accidentally saying something that made people burst out laughing, not because they were making fun of me, but because of the crazy meaning my mistake created.
That's so true. And today we're going to share some of those funny mistakes, real examples from English learners, where just one small word or sound changed the whole meaning of what they wanted to say.
We'll also talk about why these mistakes happen, how to avoid them, and what to do if you make one. Plus, we'll have a little role play to show you how to fix these kinds of mistakes in real conversations.
And we want you, our lovely listeners, to relax and enjoy this episode. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. They're part of the learning journey. And who knows, maybe you'll laugh along with us at some of these stories.
So grab a notebook if you want to write down some tips, or just sit back and enjoy. Let's jump into why funny mistakes happen in English.
All right, so let's start with the big question. Why do funny English mistakes happen so often? Brain, what do you think?
Great question, Anna. I think the first reason is that English has so many words that sound similar, but mean completely different things. For example, beach and, well, I won't say the other word, but you know what I mean?
Oh, yes, we'll get to that example soon. But you're right, pronunciation can be tricky. A small change in sound can make a word go from totally normal to totally embarrassing.
Exactly. And then there's word choice. English is full of words that look the same or are close in meaning, but they're not, like embarrassed and pregnant. Did you know learners from some countries mix those up because of their language background?
Yes, in some languages like Spanish, the word embarazada means pregnant, but it looks like the English word embarrassed. That's called a false friend, a word that looks familiar but actually means something different.
Right? And these false friends can cause funny or sometimes awkward mistakes. Another reason funny mistakes happen is because learners try to translate directly from their own language. And sometimes that just doesn't work.
Oh, I see this a lot. For example, a student once told me I have 25 years. They meant I'm 25 years old, but they were thinking in their native language where that sentence structure is correct.
And finally, grammar. Just putting words in the wrong order or using the wrong tense can change the meaning. Like saying, I cooked my mother. Yikes.
I hope not. That one letter for really matters. It should be I cooked for my mother. So small errors can make a huge difference in meaning.
Exactly. And honestly, Anna, these mistakes are normal. They happen to every language learner. The key is to laugh, learn, and move on.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what? Sometimes these funny mistakes actually help learners remember the correct word or structure even better, because when we laugh, we remember.
So true. All right? Now that we've talked about why these funny mistakes happen, let's jump into some hilarious real-life examples. You're going to love these.
All right, it's time for the fun part, real-life examples of English mistakes that totally change the meaning. Anna, do you want to kick it off? Oh, I've got a good one. So I was teaching an English class, and one of my students wanted to say they needed a new sheet for their bed. But instead of saying sheet, well, let's just say they said a different word that starts with sh and means poop.
Oh no, I can imagine the whole class trying to stay serious and failing.
Exactly. Everyone tried so hard not to laugh, but then we all ended up laughing together. The student was a bit embarrassed, but also laughed too, and after that, they never mixed up sheet again.
That's the power of funny mistakes. They stick in your mind. I had a similar story when I met a learner who kept saying, "I'm boring," when they meant "I'm bored.
Oh, that changes the whole meaning. I'm boring means you make other people feel bored.
Exactly. I asked, "Are you trying to say you're bored? Or that you're boring to other people?" They laughed and said, "Oh no, I'm bored." So we practiced it a few times, and they got it.
I've heard that one a lot too. The same happens with fun and funny. Learners say the movie was very funny when they mean it was enjoyable, but it wasn't actually funny.
Right. Funny means it made you laugh, but fun means it was enjoyable. Tiny difference, but the meaning changes completely.
Here's another one that still makes me laugh. A student once wanted to say they had a bad cold and told me I have a bad cow.
A bad cow? That's fantastic. How did that happen?
I think it was just pronunciation. They were trying to say cold, but it came out as cow. It was so funny, but after that day they always remembered the difference between cold and cow.
That's amazing. And it really shows how important those small sounds are.
Oh, and do you remember that time one of your students tried to order dessert and instead of saying dessert, they said desert?
Yes, they told the waiter, "I'd like some dessert, please." And the waiter said, "I'm afraid we don't have any sand here."
Poor learner. But it's such a good reminder, stress and pronunciation matter. Dessert has the stress on the second syllable dessert.
Exactly. And speaking of pronunciation, I had a student once tell someone, "I want to kiss you," when they meant, "I want to catch you."
Oh dear, I hope that didn't get them into trouble.
Thankfully, the person understood it was just a language mistake. But that's the thing, sometimes a small sound makes a big difference.
So listeners, as you can see, funny mistakes are totally normal. And we're sharing these not to make fun of anyone, but to help you remember these little traps so you can avoid them.
Exactly. And if you make a mistake like this, just laugh, say, "Oh, I meant to say," and move on. No big deal.
All right, coming up next, we'll talk about why context matters so much in English because sometimes even when you make a mistake, people can still understand you.
All right, so we've heard some really funny examples of English mistakes. But here's the good news most of the time, even if you make a mistake, people still understand you. And that's all thanks to context.
Exactly. Context is like a big clue. It helps people figure out what you're trying to say even if you use the wrong word or pronunciation.
Right. Let's take that "I want to kiss you" example. Imagine a learner is playing a game of tag with friends, and they say, "I want to kiss you." The friends probably understand they meant catch because of what's happening.
Yes, they see you running laughing. It's clear you're talking about the game, not about kissing. So the situation gives them the meaning even if the words were wrong.
And that's true in conversations, too. If you're in a restaurant and you ask for dessert with your meal, the waiter probably knows you want dessert cake or ice cream, not a plate of sand.
Exactly. People listen to your words, but they also think about where you are, what you're doing, and how you're saying it. That's context.
But of course, context can't always save you. If your mistake changes the meaning too much, or if it's in writing, people might get confused.
That's true. And that's why it's still important to learn those tricky words and practice them. But remember, native speakers aren't looking for perfect English. They want to understand you, and context helps them do that.
Absolutely. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Most of the time, people will figure out what you mean, and if they don't, they'll probably just ask.
And sometimes mistakes make conversations more fun and memorable.
So true. Okay, next we're going to share more hilarious real-life examples where one small mistake changed the whole meaning. Get ready to laugh. All right, let's keep the fun going. more real-life examples of English mistakes that completely change the meaning. Anna, what do you have for us?
Okay, here's a classic. A student of mine wanted to say I cooked for my mother to tell me they helped with dinner, but they forgot the word for and said I cooked my mother.
Oh no! That sounds like they put their poor mother in the oven.
Exactly, and the look on my face must have been so shocked because the student immediately said, "Wait, what did I say?" When I explained, we both burst out laughing and they never forgot the phrase again.
That tiny word for made all the difference. And this is a good reminder that prepositions matter.
Absolutely. Okay, another one. A learner once meant to say I'm full after a big meal, but they said I'm pregnant.
Oh, wow. That definitely surprised the people at the table, I bet.
It did. And it's actually a common mistake in some languages where the word for full and pregnant can get mixed up when translated into English. It was so funny, but we gently corrected it and moved on.
That's a great example of those false friends we talked about earlier.
Yes, and here's another pronunciation story. A learner tried to say I want to focus on my work. But the way they pronounced focus, well, let's just say it sounded a lot like a bad word starting with F.
Oh, I know that one poor learner, they're trying to sound serious and professional, and instead it sounds not so polite.
Exactly, and I told them, okay, let's practice that word carefully so you feel confident saying it. And they did.
You know, another one I remember was a student who said, "My father is a chef," but they pronounced it like chief. So I imagined their dad wearing a feather headdress and leading a tribe.
That's brilliant. Again, pronunciation changes everything, and people will probably guess the right meaning, but it's always good to learn the difference.
I had a learner who wanted to say, "I'm excited to meet someone," but they said, "I'm exited," like they left the building already.
Oh dear, just one little letter missing and suddenly you're not excited, you're gone.
Exactly. And it shows how even small spelling or pronunciation mistakes can change meaning in funny ways.
And you know these stories are funny, but they also show how brave English learners are. You're speaking in a new language, mistakes happen. The important thing is to keep trying, laugh about it, and learn.
Couldn't agree more, Anna. And listeners, if you've ever made a mistake like this, don't feel bad. It means you're learning and growing.
All right, after those hilarious examples, let's move on to something really helpful: how native speakers react to funny mistakes and how you can handle it.
Okay, so after all those funny examples, I bet some of our listeners are thinking, what happens if I make a mistake like that when I'm talking to a native speaker?
That's such an important question, and I want to start by saying most native speakers are kind and patient. They understand that English is not your first language.
Absolutely! Think about it. If someone tried to speak your language and made a mistake, would you laugh at them in a mean way? No. You'd probably smile, maybe help them, right?
Exactly. And actually, when native speakers hear these small mistakes, most of them can guess what you really meant because of the context we talked about earlier.
Right? And here's another thing, sometimes they do laugh, but not to be rude. They're just surprised, or they think the situation is funny, and often they're laughing with you, not at you.
That's so true. I remember once a learner told me I'm boring when they meant I'm bored. I smiled and said, "No, you're not boring at all." We laughed together and kept the conversation going.
Exactly. And I've seen native speakers actually admire learners who try to speak English, even when mistakes happen. They respect the effort.
Yes. So if you make a funny mistake, here's what you can do. Smile, correct yourself if you can, and move on. You could say something like, "Oh, I meant to say," and keep going.
And the best part? When you handle it with confidence and a smile, people focus on your positive attitude, not the mistake.
Exactly. So don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you from speaking. Remember, native speakers aren't expecting perfect English. They just want to communicate with you.
Beautifully said, Anna. And coming up next, we're going to share some simple tips to avoid these funny mistakes in the future. All right, listeners, it's time for a quick role play. We're going to show you how a funny mistake might happen in a conversation and how you can handle it smoothly. Ready, Anna?
Ready? Let's do this. So, Brain, let's imagine we're meeting at a cafe. Hi, Brain, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Oh, I'm so hungry. I can't wait to eat some dessert.
Desert? You want to eat sand?
Oh, I meant dessert. I'm so hungry I can't think clearly. Thanks for catching that.
No problem. What dessert do you want?
I think I'll have a chocolate cake. And maybe some ice cream, too. So, did you hear that, listeners? I made a small mistake. I said desert instead of dessert. But I just laughed, corrected myself, and kept going.
Exactly. And I didn't laugh at Brain. I laughed with him because mistakes like that are funny and normal.
And see how Anna helped me out gently? No one was embarrassed. That's how most native speakers react in real life, too.
So remember, if you make a funny mistake, just smile, correct yourself, and keep the conversation going.
Coming up next, we'll share tips to avoid funny mistakes so you can speak with even more confidence. All right, after all those fun examples and the role play, let's get into something really useful. How can you avoid these funny mistakes when you speak English?
Yes. And first, let's be clear. It's impossible to avoid all mistakes. Even native speakers say the wrong thing sometimes. But here are some simple tips that can help you reduce those tricky errors.
Tip number 1, slow down a little when you speak. Many funny mistakes happen because learners are trying to speak too fast and the words get mixed up.
So true. When you slow down just a bit, you give yourself time to think about the word you really want to say.
Tip number 2, practice words that sound similar, like dessert and desert, or bored and boring, or focus and well-trained laughs, that other word that can sound bad if you don't pronounce it clearly.
Exactly. You can make a list of these confusing pairs and practice them out loud. Even record yourself and listen.
Tip number 3, learn the stress and rhythm of words. For example, dessert has the stress on the second syllable, dessert. And dessert, the dry place, has the stress on the first syllable, D-S-E-R-T.
Yes, English is all about stress and rhythm. When you get that right, people understand you more easily.
Tip number 4, listen to native speakers as much as you can. The more you hear English, the more natural these words and sounds will feel to you.
Exactly. Podcasts, movies, conversations surround yourself with English. Your ears will start to notice the small differences between words.
And tip number 5, don't be afraid to pause and correct yourself. If you realize you said something wrong, just smile and say, "Oh, I meant," and continue.
Yes, that shows confidence, and native speakers will appreciate your effort.
And honestly, making mistakes is part of the learning process. Some of these funny mistakes will help you remember the correct word forever.
Absolutely. So don't worry too much. Use these tips, have fun, and keep speaking.
Next up, we'll wrap up with final thoughts and a fun listener challenge, so stay with us. All right, Anna, before we wrap up, let's do a quick-fire round of funny mini-mistakes. I'll say the mistake, you tell us what it should be, and we'll both have a laugh. Ready?
Ready, let's go.
A learner once said, "I have a sheep in my bedroom."
They meant ship or probably sheet like a bed sheet. I hope it wasn't a real sheep.
Someone said, "I'm so hot, I think I have a temperature of 200 degrees.
Oh dear, I think they meant I have a fever. At 200 degrees, they'd be cooked.
One of my students said, "I'm going to the beach to buy vegetables."
Haha, I think they meant market. Unless the beach is selling veggies these days.
A learner once told me I really enjoy eating crap.
Oh no, they meant crab. Just one sound changes everything.
And finally, I like to sit on the chicken at home.
I'm sure they meant kitchen. Oh, English can be so tricky.
See, everyone? These mini mistakes are harmless funny and part of the journey.
Exactly. The key is to laugh, learn, and keep practicing.
All right, coming up next, let's wrap up with final thoughts and listener challenge to end today's episode on a high note. Okay, listeners, let's finish strong. It's time to create your No More Funny Mistakes plan.
Yes, it's simple, and if you follow this plan, you'll make fewer of those funny mistakes and feel more confident when you speak.
Step 1. Write down 3 words or phrases that you often mix up. Maybe it's dessert and desert or bored and boring.
Step 2. Practice saying these words out loud every day, maybe when you brush your teeth or look in the mirror. Slow down and focus on the correct sounds.
Step 3. Listen for these words in real conversations, in podcasts, videos, or when you talk to others. Notice how native speakers say them.
Step 4. Don't be afraid to pause and correct yourself if you catch a mistake. That's what confident speakers do.
And Step 5. Keep a funny mistake diary. Write down the mistakes you make, have a laugh, and review them so you don't repeat them.
Love that. Remember, mistakes are part of learning. With this plan, you'll learn faster and have fun along the way.
All right, let's wrap up with some final thoughts and a challenge for our awesome listeners. Well, Anna, what a fun episode. We've laughed at some hilarious mistakes, but we've also learned a lot about how to handle them, right?
Absolutely, Brain. And I hope all of you listening remember this: funny mistakes don't mean failure. They mean you're learning, growing, and being brave enough to speak.
That's so true. And here's our listener challenge for you this week. Write down one funny English mistake you've made before and share it with a friend, a teacher, or even in the comments if you're watching on YouTube.
Yes, and laugh about it. The more you can enjoy these moments, the more confident you'll feel speaking English in the future.
And remember, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to communicate, connect, and keep improving.
Exactly. So go out there, speak English, make mistakes, and keep smiling.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. We can't wait to see you in the next episode of the English Learning Podcast.
Bye for now and happy learning!